all our resources default to version 1. We can change that with the API version attribute. Let's open our cities controller. Let's say that we want cities to be a version 1 thing and points of interest to be a version 2 thing. To that avail, we apply the API version attribute at level of our controller. We pass through the version number, which is 1.0. That's what we do at level of the cities controller. And at level of the points of interest controller, we do the same, but we pass through 2.0 as version. Alright, let's try that again. Let's first try getting our cities again. So we set the accept header to application JSON and we execute this. And we get back our cities. That makes sense because the default version is 1 and that matches the API version attribute at level of the cities controller. But what would happen if we try to get the points of interest for a city? Let's try that out. We pass through 1 as city ID. We make sure we set the accept header to something we support and we click execute. We get back unsupported API version. And that also makes sense. We didn't pass through a version, so the default version is assumed, 1, but our points of interest controller is a version 2 controller. So this seems to work. But default versions only get us so far. What we really want is to be able to effectively pass through the version via the URI and have that be compared to the versions we set as supported API versions via the API version attribute. We more or less know how to do that already. We can accept URI parameters via accolades. So let's open the cities controller and let's add an API version here as part of the route template. By passing through v and then version : API version between accolades, we're stating that we want to allow the user to pass through a version parameter which will be compared to the supported API version. And we do the same for our points of interest. There we go. Let's give that a try. So we refresh the documentation and we see that we can effectively pass through a version here. Let's try it out. We pass through version 1 for the cities. We execute this and we get back the cities. Now let's try passing through version 2. Let's execute this and we get back unsupported API version. As expected, because the cities controller is a version 1 controller. Just to be sure, let's see what happens if we input version number 2 when trying to get the points of interest for a city. This should work. We get back a 403. Seems like I forgot to comment out an authorize attribute. However, we do see that API supported versions is set to 2.0. So this should work. Let's quickly fix that. I see what's going on. It's not the authorize attribute I forgot, but we've still got this code here from the previous module in which we check whether a city name matches a city ID. So let's comment this out for now so we can continue with our test. There we go. Let's give this another try. Let's try getting the points of interest for a city. Pass through 1 for city ID and 2 for the version. We make sure we select something that is supported for the accept header value and we click execute. And there we go. This time we do get back the points of interest or point of interest for the city. One more thing. Say we're building a real world API. We start with cities, that's version 1. Then we create a version 2, the points of interest. In a real-life scenario, it's not uncommon to also include support for the cities endpoints in version 2, right? Well, we can do that. The API version attribute can be applied multiple times. Like this, the cities endpoints will be supported for version 1 and version 2. Let's give that a try. We pass through 2 as version this time when getting the list of cities, and we click execute. And this time it does work. With that, we've built in versioning support for our API. Let's continue with learning how to improve our API documentation.